Words can give life. Words can formulate ideologies, democracy and freedom and capitalism and all the things we enjoy in this unique country. We have to find ways to give words to that so that it can be understood. Words form pictures of our minds. Words help to translate an interchange of thought and ideas between human beings. So one of the most important skills is the skill of good communication. Learning words, phrases, sentences, whether it's written or spoken. Language is so powerful in affecting our lives and using those skills to affect other people's lives. So let's talk about communication and how powerful it is and how important it is. I've got 4 steps to achieve good communication. Let me give you this. Let's dive right into it. And I'm sure if you were to just ponder for a while, you'd probably come up with these same 4 steps. I'm not covering anything new. All right, these are just basic fundamentals. But here's where it all starts. Fundamental. Somebody once said, being successful is not doing extraordinary things. Being successful is simply doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. So let's talk about some fairly ordinary things. See if we can't find an extraordinary way to put it into action. 4 steps to achieve good communications. Number 1, have something good to say. Right, that's obvious. Success is a study of the obvious, a refined study. So to achieve good communications, first of all, you've got to have something. In computer language, it's very simple. Nothing in, nothing out. You cannot speak that which you do not know. You can't share what you don't feel, and you can't translate what you don't have, and you can't give what you don't possess. So first of all, to give it, to share it, for it to be effective, you got to have it. So good communications, first of all, starts with preparation. Key word. Preparation is simply getting ready. And a big share of our life is simply getting ready, getting ready. That first 5 years is to get ready to start our formal education. The next 8 years. 8 years is a chunk of time, right? But after 8 years now, you're ready for high school. That's a long time. 5 years and then 8 more years. That's a long time to get ready. So now we go through 4 years of high school. And all those 4 laborious years are to get ready for college. Now another 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, 6 more years to get ready, right? To be gainfully employed and earn a living and get out there in the marketplace, see what we can do. A lot of life is just simply getting ready, preparation. Now, to get ready for good communications, you got to spend part of your year, part of your day, getting ready for the next day, part of the week getting ready for the next week. It's so easy to be casual about not continually preparing for the next day, the next week, the next month, the next year. Getting ready. And this is one of the most important areas to get ready in. Good communication. Key word, research. Continual research. It's easy to hope that skills that you learned in the 70s will last through the 80s. Or the information you gathered during the 70s will be sufficient for the 80s. But not so. We've got to continually learn, continually grow. So key word, research, preparation, getting ready. Preparation is like building an account from which to draw. When you get ready to talk, you want to make sure you've got a verbal check that'll cash. Here's the power in good communication. When what you say is only the tip of the iceberg of all you know, that's when communications becomes powerful. When what you say is only a portion of all that you know because you've gotten ready for this moment, this time, this occasion. I'm sure we've all been around some people who very quickly told us more than they knew. It didn't take them but a short period of time to run out of illustrations, to exhaust all their stories, probably meaning great lack of preparation, great lack of deliberately getting ready. Now, it is possible in some respects to prepare for life just by accident. You know, life does teach us some things by accident. There are some things you can learn by just careening from wall to wall and stumbling from day to day and staggering from week to week. I mean, you can learn some things that way. But the other 99% of what you need to know has got to be on purpose. Preparation on purpose. Good phrase. Am I engaged in preparation on purpose to get me ready to do in communication the skills that are necessary to take me where I want to go? Good question. And that's what we're here for, to ask some of the tough questions. When I met Mr. Schoaf, he asked me the tough questions. I'm 25 years old. He said, Mr. Rohn, you've been working 6 years. I started working when I was 19. Mr. Schoaf asked me a simple question. He said, Mr. Rohn, how are you doing? I said, not very well. Mr. Schoaf said, I suggest you not do that anymore. Wow, tough question. Mr. Schoaf said, Mr. Rohn, how much money have you invested in the last 6 years? I said, what do you suppose, roughly? Not any. Schoaf said, who sold you on that plan? Wow, tough question, tough question. And it's so important for somebody to come along and ask us tough questions and not let us get by with small numbers and small answers. So that's what I'd like to do, ask some of the tough questions. Let me give you now some key words that'll help us to prepare for good communication. Key words. Number 1, interest. Prepare for good communications. Take a new interest in life. Here's a good pledge to make at the beginning of the day. I'm going to be more interested in this day. I'm going to see if I can get more from the day. Boy, it's easy if you're not careful to just try to get through the day. But sophisticated people learn to get from the day. They don't want a day to go by without gathering up some new ideas, some new impressions, new color, new nuances, new sense of worth and value. They gather from the day, interest. And here's 2 of the major subjects to study with interest, life and people. Develop a new, sharper interest, new, sharper focus on life and people. What's happening, what's going on. Now, that new commitment to a new interest for the day will get you ready for the years to come with better communications. Because to say it well, you have to feel it well. To say it well, you have to know it. And to know it, you just got to go through the laborious process, gathering, extracting the information. So that's the first word, interest. Here's the second word, fascination. A bit beyond just simple interest. Interested people are probably satisfied that it ticks. And that's good to know. It ticks. Fascinated people want to know what? What makes it? Fascinated people aren't satisfied usually with surface information. They've got to know more than just what appears. What's really going on? The hippies had a pretty good question in the 60s. What was it? The hippies. Good question they had. What's happening? That's a good question. What's happening? And sophisticated hippies say, what's really happening, right? What is really going on? What's making things tick? What's making things happen? Why do people feel like they do and think like they think? What is the difference between success and failure? Who has the appetite and who doesn't have the appetite? This whole fascination about life and people and circumstances and society and money and banks and churches and sermons and books and records and life experiences and enterprise and nations and color and races and religion. A whole fascination for this wide panorama of life and life experiences. I'm telling you, if you'll take a new fascinated look at life and what's going on, it will now show up in color and sharpness in your future communications. It'll have a new reach and a new depth. It'll have a new insight, a new excitement. Now, I've got a good experiment for you to try. The next time you're tempted to be frustrated, see if you can turn it into fascination. How to turn frustration into fascination. That's a good skill to try to learn. I'm sitting on the freeway in Los Angeles. My airplane leaves in 45 minutes. The traffic is not moving an inch. I am now fascinated. I'm telling you. Now, it doesn't work every time. I'm willing to admit that. Nothing works every time. But can you imagine the extra value you'll get from a frustrating experience if you just think about this? Can I turn this frustrating experience into something fascinating? I'll learn a lot more from it if I'm fascinated by it than just frustrated by it. So just try that little key. Try to turn frustration into fascination. And in a frustrating experience, if a smile comes across your face, other people will wonder, What's going on? But it'll just be private between you and me. The man taught me how to be fascinated, if possible, in a frustrating situation. Okay, turning frustration into the extra learning discipline, the extra learning skill. And I think this is part of it. Here's the next key word. This is a big one. Sensitivity. To really communicate well and to touch people in a wide range and from a wide range of experience, you've just got to have felt the experience. It's got to be part of you. Sensitivity training. Being touched by a wide range of human experience, perhaps even beyond your own. Incredible words said about the master teacher, Jesus. It said he was moved. Wow, that's a key word. It said he was moved with compassion. What was happening moved him, touched him. Another phrase said he was touched. He was moved. He was affected. On more than one occasion, he cried. So part of that human drama of experience, I think, for us to really be able to reach people and touch people with words and ideas and emotion and phrases and sentences loaded with feelings, we've got to go into this area of sensitivity, being touched, being affected by our own lives as well as the lives of other people. Sensitivity. Being touched, being moved. This is part of the heavyweight stuff that starts to show up now in our language and in our communication. I've lived a rather sheltered life all my life, so I've had to really work on this. What do I know about tragedy? I've never had any tragedy. Part of the world is tragic. Part of life is tragic. And if you don't at least try to understand the dark side of life, the tragic side, the extreme sorrow side, your life is left a bit shallow. And sometimes when you live such a sheltered life, you just have to try to go outside of your own small world of sheltered experiences and see if you can't live as someone else might have lived, or at least try to be touched by the experience. Now, you can't really know till you live it. I understand that, but at least you can try. And if you do your homework here in sensitivity for a wider range of experience than your own, I promise you that extra worth will show up in your conversation and in your communication. When I lived in Northern California, I used to go to San Francisco 2 or 3 times a year, spend a day in the Tenderloin for a farm boy from Idaho. A Tenderloin in San Francisco, what an experience. And if you just go spend a day, you see what we call the other side. And if you just spend a day there and walk the streets where those lonely walk, and go eat where they eat, and listen to some of those stories, you come away with a whole new sense of the great distance between failure and success. The whole distance between goodness and evil, between despair and joy. And you come away with more of a sense of value, because the true values of life come by the contrast. And unless you experience more of the contrast, even the values you consider valuable become a bit shallow if you don't understand the contrast. It's hard to really appreciate winning until you've done some losing. It's hard to appreciate success until you've done some failing. And if you've done some failing, success now becomes a much larger worth and value and commodity if you understand a bit of the other side. So part of this is just deliberately go where experiences beyond your own touch your life to get somewhat of an education as to the contrast of life, difference. It'll educate your mind and educate your spirit. And sure enough, that extra worth will start showing up in your sentences and your words. They'll be weightier. They'll be heavier. They'll mean more when you talk to somebody. I met Frank, the bartender in the Tenderloin. Frank is a bartender in this sleazy little bar. You wouldn't believe this place. Frank sees more tragedy in a week than most people see in a lifetime, if you work in one of those places. I'm visiting Frank one day, and Frank and I are talking. Frank says, see that lady sitting over there on the bar stool? And I said, yes. He said, how old do you think she is? I said, she's 45. Frank says, she's 25. I said, wow. He said, that's Cookie. Her name is Cookie. He said, Cookie used to be a go-go dancer back in the go-go days. But then he said Cookie developed some kind of bone disease in her legs and her hip. And he said now she's had all kinds of operations, bolts and the pins trying to hold her together. And he says now she's crippled, she can hardly walk, so her go-go days are over. And sure enough, Cookie was very crippled. Frank says Cookie also has a little boy, 5 years old, and he's dying of leukemia. So he said Cookie comes several times a week on that bar stool and plays a little music to try to cheer up her life. And she usually drinks far too much, gets wasted, and I have to call a taxi to come and take her home. Wow. I thought, Cookie, how come her life worked out like that and my life worked out like this? How come I get to travel around the world and Cookie finds it hard to even get home? That kind of exposure, that kind of sensitivity, that kind of study. Now, you can't really know it unless you live there. I understand that. But you can go a great deal into trying to understand a wider range of human experience. And if you will try to let those experiences touch you, let them affect you, let them educate you, let them give you a broader range of emotional wealth and worth, I'm telling you, that extra worth will start showing up in your language, in your words, and in your sentences. And you'll be able to touch people that you couldn't touch before. You'll be able to reach people you couldn't reach before you had the experience. Your words will have more of a drawing than they had before just by going through some of these experiences. So I'm asking you to consider the word sensitivity and ask yourself, what could I do and what experiences could I make sure that I engage in that would give me a broader range of understanding of human suffering as well as human joy, of the dilemma as well as the confidence, of the joy as well as the sorrow, of the success as well as the failures of life, and try to gain an understanding in a broader sense, and let that have an effect on your future ability to touch and reach somebody else. Key word, sensitivity. Here's number 4, knowledge. Good communication starts with this laborious task of gathering knowledge. And I've got a parenthesis for you to make, working knowledge. Knowledge that you deliberately gather that will work for you in the future. This is why Shoaff taught me to keep these journals. He said, gather working knowledge. Knowledge that you go back over. Knowledge that you review. Ideas that you go back through one more time. See if you can't find the extra meaning, the extra depth, the extra worth, the extra value. Working knowledge. Your library, the books you read. The deliberate attempts to broaden your understanding. That's very important in bettering your communication skills. An ever-increasing amount of the refinement of intellect. That's so important, this working knowledge. We covered interest, we covered fascination, we covered sensitivity, and we covered knowledge. Now, I've said all this to support my number 1 point in good communications. Have something good to say. I was asked to give a talk. This has been many years ago now to a service club. And I was trying to think of a good topic for my noon lecture. And I came up with this. 4 ifs make life worthwhile. And I thought it was something good to say. Let me just pass it along to you, in case somebody asks you to make it. Tell them where you got it, please. 4 ifs that make life worthwhile. Life is worthwhile, number 1, if you learn. Life is worthwhile if you learn. Your own experience can be a great teacher. The last 3 years, you've probably been doing it right or been doing it wrong. Mr. Shoaff pointed out to me when I was 25, don't ignore the last 6 years. 6 years is a pretty good chunk of time to go over and evaluate and put it on the scales and say, it either weighs or it doesn't weigh. You're either on track or off track. Let's take a look at our own experience. Another big way to learn is from other people's experience. Might as well gather up someone else's experience. OPE, we call it, other people's experience. Somebody went through something for 5 years, and they wrote a book, and you could read the book in 5 days. Wouldn't that be an advantage? Well, yes, if you read the book. Now, this isn't easy stuff, right? This is not casual stuff. This is the extraordinary kind of learning and skill necessary, I think, to gain the high life treasure. But I think it's worth it all. Small price to pay for treasure. The extra reading, the commitment to the excellence of learning. Life is worthwhile if you learn. Number 2, life is worthwhile if you try. You got to try something with what you know. Can you win the next game that's set up? I don't know. How are we going to know? You got to try. How else are we going to know whether you can be a winner in the next game? I don't know. Just make a commitment to try. When the final book on you is written, let it show your wins and let it show your losses. But don't let it show you didn't play. How would you explain that? So you got to play. You got to try. See what you can do with your life. See what you can do with the next game. The key to life is to give it a try. I put the bar up 3 feet, ask the kids, who can jump 3 feet? I get a whole variety of response. I don't think so. I'm not sure. I don't know. Yes, I can. Say, well, how are we going to know? You've got to take a run at it. I don't know any other way. You've just got to take a run at it. Who knows if you can jump 3 feet till you try? Now, if you try and knock the bar down, does that mean you can't jump 3 feet? No. Let me give you the next clue. Try it again. Try it over. Try it another time. Try it another way. Try it with more speed. There's all kinds of ways to try. Number 3, life is worthwhile if you stay. You got to learn to hang in there. You've got to learn to stay from spring till fall. Many people plant in the spring and leave in the summer. They're gone. First hot day. I thought, sure, John, it'd last a month. Where is he? I don't know. Somebody said, boo, and he quit. Where is he? I don't know. I'd see, to win, you got to learn to stay. Just because you're behind in the first quarter, you can't leave. You got to learn to stay and hang in there. Guy builds a foundation. And then he walks off, wanders away, and builds another foundation. He never stays. Puts up the walls and puts on the roof. You got to learn to stay, hang in there. The last one. Life is worthwhile if you care. Caring is an important human value. And I wrote, if you care at all, you'll get some results. If you care enough, you'll get incredible results. Caring. To care for the day, to use its time. To care for the people, to help them with abilities. To care for the enterprise, its dignity and its reputation. And to care for yourself, become all you can become. Stretch as far as you can stretch, accomplish as much as you can accomplish. Become all that you can become. Caring. Having something good to say. 4 F's make life worthwhile. First step to good communication. Preparation. Research. Getting ready. Making deposits in your mental, spiritual, moral bank account upon which to draw. Here's the second step to achieve good communications. We have finally gotten to it. After you've got something good to say, number 2 is obvious. Learn to say it well. Once you've got the information and the awareness and the understanding, the knowledge, now the key in good communication is how to translate it into meaningful words, emotions, feelings, phrases, sentences, paragraphs. Very important now to be able to translate it. Learning to say it well. Now, this is a whole subject in itself. This is worth a weekend of study. Let me just give you a short list, suggestions on learning to say it well. Number 1, repetition. Just takes practice. I don't know any substitute for the practice. To learn any skill, you just got to go through it again and again and again. My first attempt at lecturing, especially outside my own comfortable business circles, was pretty tough. Learning to say it well was a struggle for me. But I kept at it and kept at it. And now I've gotten better. I do one seminar called Challenge to Succeed. It's about 4 hours long, and I can do it without any notes. Every once in a while, a person comes and says, you lectured this evening for 4 hours without any notes. How can you do that? I said, it's very simple. I've done it a few thousand times. We call that simplicity. You just do it over and over and often. I've got a good question. How long do you want it to take to get good at what you do? You say, not very long. Then you've got to do it often. Do it often. Repetition starts the skill. Now, it also must be repetition with the objectivity of getting better. Because sometimes it's easy to be casual just about repetition and not get much better. How about the man who's been talking for 10 years, but he's making the same verbal errors he made 10 years ago? Or 10 years ago he said, I don't quite know how to put this. 10 years later he's saying, I don't quite know how to put this. We say, hey, 10 years is too long not to know how to put it. We can give you 10 hours not to know how to put it. You can stretch our patience and take 10 days not to know how to put it, but we can't give you 10 years. 10 years is too long not to make enough progress in better language skills. So, repetition with purpose. The purpose is to grow and to change, to develop, to expand, to make progress. Here's some other parts to saying it well. Sincerity. From the heart. With noble intent. Wishing to bring value. That adds immeasurably to your ability to speak well, communicate well. Sincerity. There's no substitute for sincerity. I can forgive you for a mistake in judgment, but I can't forgive you for a mistake in intent. Next key part to saying it well, brevity. Part of the key is to be brief. You can't linger too long, I've discovered in my lecturing and speaking around the world. You can't linger too long on any one point. Brevity. I used to tell stories too long. I get involved in a long story on and on. By the time I hit the punchline, people forgot how it started. Now it doesn't make sense. Too long. Here's why brevity is important. The human attention span is short. You haven't got long to get it said before you lose your audience. Now, the best practice I know of here is practice on the kids, because their attention span is really short. Right? Underline really. You talk to kids for 30 seconds. They say, how long is this going to take? I mean, they're already bent out of shape, right? Looks like you're going to take forever to get to the point, get it said. Brevity. Jesus, master communicator, was probably the best. In selecting his team, he would look at somebody and say, follow me. That's brief. That's right. That's short. Now, how could you be so brief and yet be so effective? I think probably because of all that he was that he didn't have to say. Sometimes we try to make up in words what we lack in self-confidence. So part of the key to being brief is personal development, personal growth, personal awareness, understanding self-worth. Now you can use the economy of words. And this is a good position to be in. What you are adds so much weight to what you say that you don't have to say very much. Brevity is a good point on saying it well. Next is style. And there's all kinds of art style, from body language and gestures, to facial expressions and eyes and emotions. Style is very important. Here's part of the clue. It's not just the matter you cover, it's the manner in which you cover the matter. Style is important to attract someone's attention, emphasize the point. Now, I've got a couple of good points here on style. Be a student of style. Don't just copy someone's style. Make sure that study of style becomes distinctly you. But it is also important to be a student of style. How people speak well. Be a student of that. And then borrowing bits and pieces from people you admire and the way they can communicate. Then make sure that all of that blended into you becomes your own distinctive style. Style is very important. Now, there's a variety of styles. Ancient story tells us of John the Baptist had a unique style. He came out of the desert dressed in camel's hair, and his diet was grasshoppers and wild honey. And he screamed and yelled and thundered curses on the king and other people. That was his style. They came to see John. I'm sure, right? I'm sure the word was out. You got to come and see this guy. Not just what he said, but his style, I'm sure, was something to watch. So John had a unique style. Jesus, I'm sure, had probably a whole different style. Style is important to become uniquely John or to become uniquely you. But it's important to study your own style and say, how am I coming across in style? Should I learn to emphasize more? Should I learn to be more emphatic? All these things concerning style. Next is vocabulary. Saying it well is proper choice of words. To build my early vocabulary, I used to put 3 or 4 words I didn't know on a card and put it up on the sun visor on my car. Back in those days, I traveled a lot by car. Sure enough, by the end of the day, I'd mastered 2 or 3 words. Vocabulary. Some of my friends took a survey among prisoners in New England several years ago. They made a very important discovery, some rehabilitation program they were working on. But here's the discovery they made. There's definitely a relationship between vocabulary and behavior. The more limited the vocabulary, the more tendency to poor behavior. Isn't that amazing? Vocabulary would affect behavior. Now, if you think about it for a while, it makes sense. Here's why. Vocabulary is a way of seeing. One reason for vocabulary is to interpret what we see, to interpret what we hear. The vocabulary of the mind grapples with the words and the images come to our mind. Now, if you've got a poor set of words and skills and tools with which to interpret, you can imagine the errors and the mistakes you'll make in judgment. And since vocabulary is a way of seeing, if you can't see well, you can imagine the errors you can make and how they compound as life unfolds. We do 2 things with vocabulary. We interpret and we express. The words we have are the only words available to us. The words we know are the only tools available to us to, number one, interpret what's going on, to interpret what's being said, and to express your heart and your mind. Now, if you can't interpret well, and if you can't express well, you can imagine what a deterrent that is to good life. And the extra treasures, the extra feelings, awareness, riches, power, influence. So it's very important to have a good vocabulary. So I would ask you, one of the most important books in your library should be the dictionary. Just go through the dictionary. Words are fascinating, their origins, where they came from. Vocabulary. Now here's the last part on saying it well. Don't forget to say it. Practice the art every chance you get. Try to say it well. It's easy to be lazy in language all day and not practice the gift of the art. Then when it comes time to make an important talk, to appeal to a child, we're missing the words and missing the sharpness and missing the vocabulary simply because we lack the practice of doing it every day. If you want to get good at communication, you have to be aware of doing it every day as a practice session of getting better so that when the real important occasions arise, you will have the gift and you'll have the style, you'll have the sharpness and the clarity and the substance and the emotion. I have a key phrase for you. Actions are no substitute for words. Don't fail to say it. Now, we've heard the old expression, words are no substitute for action. That's true. Talk, 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 never act. That's not good. This also isn't good. Act, 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 and never talk. We must be gifted with words if we want the full treasure of life. So practice every occasion you get. It's okay to send somebody flowers, but don't let flowers do all your talking. Here's why. Flowers have a limited vocabulary. About the best flowers can say is, you remembered. That's about the best. Or, you care. That's about all. Flowers don't say, you do incredible things to me. Nobody in this world affects me like you do. Now, see, flowers talk, but they don't say that. That you got to add in the card. Right? That you got to add in person. So the next time you give flowers, say, just so my flowers won't do all the talking, let me add. And then put the gift of words to work to go along with the activity. And you will start to sense this whole growing excitement about using language to affect somebody, translate feelings of heart and mind. And the response you're going to get and the results you're going to get starts growing in measurable quantities. I'm just asking you to take the extra time to engage in these arts and practice. The gift of language. Communication. Assisting people with words. So we've covered step 1, have something good to say. Step 2, say it well. Here's step 3 to good communication. Read your audience. It's very important to read and pick up signals of what's happening with your audience. Now, when I first started lecturing outside my business circles, I had some problems reading my audience. I think my early audiences, they all could have left halfway through and I'd have never known it. I was so intent on what I was saying that I was a bit unconscious of what was going on out there. Then I finally learned to look up, to watch, and see what's happening. We call this reading what's happening. My largest audience has been 10,000. I wasn't the only speaker. Art Linkletter, Paul Harvey, Dr. Peel, Zig Ziglar, myself. We each had an hour. But we had 10,000 people. But now that was the first time I'd ever talked to 10,000 people. Awesome event for me. You know, Paul Harvey, he didn't have any problems. Art Linkletter, he didn't have any problems. But I had some problems. That first 4 or 5 minutes, right? 10,000 is a lot of people. And you got to read fast. Right? Because 10,000 people can turn on you quick. Learning to read what's going on back there, what's happening. Now, it's also just as important to read a person, to read a child. If you want to be effective, you got to get the feedback. You've got to pick up signals to know whether to be stronger or whether to ease off, whether to change stories, change words, change language. All of this comes by a good ability to read your audience. So let me give you some clues on reading. Number 1 is simply to listen. Part of reading is listening. You pick up a lot of clues as to what else to say, what all to say by being a good listener. From early times, I think we've learned to be a good speaker, you've got to be a good listener. That's where you pick up the information, to listen well, especially in a private conversation, a more informal conversation. Good listening habits. That's part of reading. Number 2, you got to read what you see. There's a good book called How to Read a Person Like a Book. It's a pretty good book by Nuremberg. And it's a study of body language. Now, you can't get too deeply involved in this, or you'll be so intent on reading body language that you may miss the point. But we can all, I think, use some help here. Now, some things are very obvious. You're talking to somebody and they've got their arms folded and their chin tucked down and they're frowning. That probably means, right, you got your work cut out for you. You got to reach deep into your bag of experiences and language because this one isn't going to be easy. So some body language is fairly obvious. If you're talking to somebody and they're leaning toward the door, that probably means something, right? It means you're going to have to get with it. You're not going to have an audience long. So part of it is just being conscious, right? Body language, reading what you see. Now, kids are pretty easy to read because they don't even try to fake you out, right? You talk to kids and they're staring out the window. I mean, they don't mind showing their total unconcern. But now here's what's more challenging. In a polite society, sometimes body language can be deceiving. If somebody, while you're talking, looks at you and smiles, you've got to make sure you don't misread that. Here's what we teach in leadership skills. Don't mistake courtesy for consent. In a polite society, we've learned sometimes to be courteous. That doesn't mean we buy the story. With somebody being polite, smiling and nodding, you've got to make sure you don't misread that and stop short of the full persuasion. Don't mistake kindness for acceptance. In a polite society, we've learned to be kind, but that doesn't mean we've accepted. So part of this is a little more subtle in reading in a polite society, whether or not somebody is buying your argument, they're being persuaded by your presentation. So body language, picking up those signals. Now here's the one that's probably The most effective, but it's probably the most elusive. Reading the emotional signals. This is an area probably where the women have it over the men. Picking up the emotional signals. I think men can learn these skills, but I think women have a lot of this automatically. Men can learn it. It's something we all have to learn. Emotional signals. Picking up the signals. Whether to change your language. Be sharper or to be soft. To go after a problem or to ease back and give it time to soak. Part of this is just picking up the feelings, picking up the emotions, being sensitive to the situation. This is not easy stuff. This is extra learning stuff, extra skills. This is called summit learning. For those extra measures of rewards come from communicating by learning these extra skills. So third, very important to read your audience. How are you coming across? What is the effect? From a child to an auditorium full of people. Reading. Here's the fourth good communication. Number one, have something good to say. Number two, say it well. Number three, read your audience. Number four, intensity. Here now starts power of what we say. Part of the strength of what we say is the words we choose. The greater part of the strength of what we say is the emotions that are loaded into the words. Here's what has power unmatched. Words loaded with emotion. There is no greater power. Words have an effect, but words loaded with emotion have an incredible effect. My words may reach you, but if I can't touch you with my spirit, if I can't touch you with my emotions, my feelings, my beliefs, then I probably haven't affected you very much. We might describe words like a little straight pin, right? Guy buys a shirt, it's got all these little pins in it, right? If I took one of those little straight pins and I threw it at you, and it hit you in the face or the hand, you'd probably feel it, this little straight pin. That means I got you with my words. But what if I took that little straight pin and wired it to the end of an iron bar? And I let you have it with that. See, I can drive the pin through your heart. Now, the reason I can do that is because the pin is the word. The iron bar is the emotion, feeling, belief. All that I am, if I can put more of what I am into what I say, no telling what miracle I can wrought. No telling how much of an effect I can do. Real persuasion comes from putting you into what you say. But now here's part of the clue, and we call these extra refinement of leadership skills. Learning to measure your emotions. That's very important to learn to measure your emotions. We teach, don't shoot a cannon at a rabbit. It's effective, but you got no more rabbits. It's called too much firepower for the occasion. You don't need an atomic explosion for a minor point. Enough, but not too much. We call this understanding how to measure the flow of your emotion to cover a point. Okay, but if it needs heavyweight stuff, you reach and get it. If it needs a milder approach, you learn how to measure it in milder, easier terms. Very important to measure your emotions, your feelings. Now, what do we mean by intensity and emotions? Here it is. All of your experiences and how they've affected you. That's the sum total of your emotional content. Where you've been and what you've heard and what you've seen and who you've met and this whole panorama of life experiences for you up until now and how you felt about all that. That we call the sum total of your emotions. Now, the key is to learn how to measure all that and put it in effective amounts into the words you choose. So here's the key to effective communications. Well-chosen words loaded with well-measured emotion. In the gift of a performance of an actor or an actress, splendid performance comes from knowing with skill how to use language and how to use emotion. When the time calls for it, emotions kept close to the surface, put into well-chosen words, can make the most dramatic effect on somebody's mind and somebody's heart. You can't believe the extent of your reach if you will engage in some of these communication skills.